Every morning at 6:30, at an old street corner outside a small coffee shop, a man stopped his delivery truck, placed a hot coffee on the bench where a homeless girl often sat. He never asked her name, just said, "It's cold. Drink it while it's hot." The girl in a hooded jacket just nodded slightly, smiled, "Thanks." One morning when he set down the coffee as usual, she spoke. "You don't remember me, do you?" He looked up, stunned. In the early sunlight, she removed her hood. A familiar face, eyes that had appeared in a past he thought he'd forgotten. Ethan Brooks, 36 years old, single dad, worked as a morning delivery driver and evening warehouse worker, raising his 7-year-old daughter Sophie alone after his wife died of heart disease. The phrase he always taught his daughter, "When we have nothing to give what people need most, kindness." Every morning, Ethan drove the same route through downtown. At a street corner near an old coffee shop, there was always a girl sitting quietly on a stone bench, gray jacket, wool hat, holding a small notebook. He started leaving her hot coffee without saying anything. After a few days, she began smiling when she saw him arrive. The girl looked tired, paint stains on her hands, often writing something in her notebook. When he asked jokingly, "Are you painting?" she replied quietly, "No, I'm learning to see the world again." They met for 3 weeks straight. Ethan didn't know her name, just called her in his mind, the girl in the wool hat. Sophie asked, "Daddy, who is she?" "Someone finding herself again." One morning she was absent. He saw the empty bench, just a small note. "Thank you for the coffee. It made me believe the world is still warm." That same day, the news broadcast, CEO Amelia Hart, founder of Hart Tech Corporation, disappeared after internal scandal. He looked at the photo, frowned slightly. Those eyes were strangely familiar. But Ethan's connection to this woman went far deeper than morning coffee. 5 years ago, he'd been firefighter Ethan Brooks, one of the good ones, dedicated, careful. The kind of guy who double-checked everything because lives depended on it. The night of the accident had been raining, multi-car pileup on the highway. One vehicle had caught fire, driver trapped inside, unconscious. Ethan had been first on scene, had run toward the flames while everyone else ran away, had broken the window, cut the seatbelt, dragged the woman clear just as the gas tank exploded. She'd been alive, barely. Burns on her arms, smoke inhalation, but alive. At the hospital, she'd held his hand, tears streaming. "I don't know how to live in a way that's worthy of this gift you gave me." He'd said, "Just live better than yesterday. That's all anyone can do." He'd never learned her name. Standard procedure. Firefighters didn't follow up with victims. You saved them and moved on to the next call. That's how the job worked. 2 weeks after that rescue, Ethan's wife Sarah had collapsed. Heart attack, sudden, devastating. She died before the ambulance arrived. Died while Ethan, trained in emergency medicine, tried desperately to save her and couldn't. He'd quit the fire department after that. Couldn't handle the irony, saving strangers while his own wife died. Couldn't face another emergency. Couldn't trust himself not to freeze at a critical moment. So he'd taken simple jobs, delivery driver, warehouse worker, jobs where the stakes were low, where failure meant a late package, not a dead body. And he'd raised Sophie alone, trying to teach her the values Sarah had believed in. Kindness, generosity, seeing people's humanity regardless of circumstances. The morning coffee ritual had started 6 months ago. He'd seen the girl on the bench, clearly struggling, and remembered Sarah's words. "We help because we can, not because we should." So he'd helped, one coffee at a time, never intrusive, never demanding gratitude, just consistent, quiet kindness. He'd had no idea he was helping the same woman he pulled from a burning car 5 years earlier. Conclusion of Act 1. 1 week later, the girl returned, looking thinner but still managing a smile. When he set down the coffee, she asked, "You really don't remember me, do you?" He was surprised. "Have we met before?" She looked at him for a long time. 5 years ago, you saved me from a burning car." The coffee shop owner later said, I saw them talking that morning. The way she looked at him, like she was seeing an angel. The way he looked confused, like he'd forgotten saving her life was just another Tuesday for him. Memories flooded back. A rainy night when he was still a firefighter. He'd pulled a woman trapped in a car before it exploded. She'd held his hand, saying through tears, "I don't know how to live worthy of this gift." He'd only said, "Just live better than yesterday." The girl in the wool hat was Amelia Hart, 31 years old, CEO once honored as youngest woman in top 30 under 30. But after her company was manipulated by fraudulent shareholders, she was framed, lost her reputation, had to run. "I needed to disappear to see who was still real," she said. Ethan listened silently. "You could go to the police. I used to trust the system, but it didn't save me. But you, a stranger, did." From then on, they met every morning. She helped him carry packages. He helped her get a job washing dishes at the coffee shop. The elderly owner hired her because of Ethan's simple words. She deserves to be trusted one more time. Gradually, she regained her strength. One day, Sophie ran to hug her. "Miss Amelia, I drew you in my lesson about good people." Amelia laughed, tears welling. "Thank you, sweetheart." But the relationship developing between them was complicated by Amelia's hidden truth. She wasn't just running from scandal. She was running from herself, from the person she'd become in pursuit of success. HeartTech had started as her dream, technology that served humanity, affordable medical devices, educational software for underserved communities, tools that made life better for people who needed it most. But as the company grew, so did the pressure. Investors wanted faster returns. The board wanted higher margins. Competitors were ruthless. And slowly, imperceptibly, Amelia had compromised, had cut corners, had prioritized profit over mission, had become the kind of CEO who looked at spreadsheets instead of people. The scandal hadn't been a frame-up, not entirely. Yes, her CFO had embezzled funds, but Amelia had created the culture that made it possible, had stopped asking questions, had stopped caring about anything except growth and valuation. When the truth came out, when her company imploded, she'd realized something devastating. She'd become exactly what she'd once despised, a person who valued money over meaning, who'd forgotten why she started, who'd lost herself in pursuit of success. So she disappeared, not just to escape consequences, but to figure out who she was without the title, the money, the power, to see if there was anything left of the idealistic young woman who'd wanted to change the world. Working at the coffee shop, washing dishes, living in a shelter, she'd been stripped of everything that had defined her. And in that stripping, she'd found something unexpected: peace, clarity, purpose. The people at the shelter didn't care that she used to be a CEO. The coffee shop owner didn't care about her credentials. They cared about whether she showed up on time, worked hard, treated others with respect. And Ethan, this quiet man who left coffee every morning, he embodied everything she'd lost. The ability to help without expecting anything back, to see someone struggling and just help. No agenda, no calculation, just kindness. One evening after her shift, Amelia sat with Ethan outside the coffee shop. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course." "Why do you do this? The coffee, helping me get this job. You don't know me. I could be anyone." "You are anyone. That's the point. If I only helped people I knew or people who could help me back, that wouldn't be kindness. It would be transaction." "But what if I can't pay you back? What if I'm just stuck here washing dishes for the rest of my life?" "Then you wash dishes. There's dignity in that. Honest work is honest work. Doesn't matter what the work is. You don't think I'm wasting my potential? That I should be doing something bigger? Potential is a lie we tell ourselves to avoid being present. You're here now, doing good work, being kind to customers. That's not wasting anything. That's living." Amelia felt tears coming. "How do you do that? Stay so grounded? So good?" Ethan laughed, but it was sad. "You think I'm good? I'm a guy who quit his job, who couldn't save his own wife, who works 2 minimum wage jobs and barely makes rent. I'm not good. I'm just trying." "Trying is good." Maybe, but I've learned something. You can't measure yourself by what you've lost or what you've failed at. You can only measure yourself by what you do next. Right now, in this moment. That's all any of us have. What did you fail at? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. I was a firefighter. My wife had a heart attack while I was at work. By the time I got home, she was gone. I have all this training, all these skills to save lives, and I couldn't save the person who mattered most. So I quit, ran away, took easy jobs where I couldn't fail anyone important. Been running for 5 years. But you saved me 5 years ago, and again now in a different way. I didn't save you. You saved yourself. You're the one who had the courage to disappear, to start over, to work an honest job instead of hiding behind lawyers and PR firms. I just bought you coffee. The coffee helped more than you know. When Ethan was cleaning his truck, he found a paper she'd left behind, a HeartTech stock diagram and a line written, "Will not let kindness disappear because of power." He realized she wasn't running, she was preparing to stand up. 1 month later, Amelia returned to HeartTech headquarters in secret, with support from her old lawyer. She knew the internal team had falsified records, blamed her for missing charity funds. Ethan happened to read the news. Woman once abandoned returns to prove the truth. He went to find her, afraid she'd be in danger. In the conference room, old shareholders mocked, "A CEO who washes dishes now wants to reclaim the company?" Amelia replied calmly, "If you've ever stood in fire, you'll understand the value of truth." Right then, the door opened. Ethan walked in. "Who are you?" someone asked. He answered, "The person who once saved her from flames and will do it again if needed." First twist, Amelia played security video that Ethan had helped her preserve, proving that shareholder had orchestrated the embezzlement. The entire room was shocked. Police were called. After the hearing, HeartTech returned to Amelia's control. The press reported, "CEO returns thanks to a stranger's kindness." Amelia went to see Ethan at the parking lot. She said, "Do you know why I recognized you?" He stayed silent. "Because in the smoke and fire, you didn't ask who I was. You just said, 'Are you okay?' Because at that moment, you were just someone who needed help, not a CEO." She smiled. "That's something no one else could do." Second twist. 1 week later, Amelia announced the opening of Heart Foundation, a fund supporting reintegration for unemployed people. First director, Ethan Brooks. "You don't know computers, you're not good at speeches, but you have what I lack, faith in people." The entire hall stood and applauded when she said, "We can't buy back dignity with money, but we can start it with kindness." But the transformation was more profound than the press releases suggested. Amelia didn't just reclaim her company, she rebuilt it from the ground up. New board members, all selected for ethics rather than connections. New policies prioritizing employee welfare and product mission over short-term profits. New transparency measures ensuring what had happened could never happen again. And she brought Ethan into the process, not as a figurehead, but as a genuine partner. His perspective, grounded in real struggle, in understanding what it meant to work multiple jobs and still not make ends meet, transformed how the company operated. He pushed for higher wages for entry-level positions, for comprehensive benefits including mental health coverage, for flexible schedules that accommodated single parents, for second-chance hiring programs that gave people with gaps in their resumes opportunities to rebuild careers. The board resisted at first. "This will hurt profits." "Good," Amelia said. "We've been chasing profits at the expense of people for too long. Time to reverse that. Shareholders will revolt. We'll find new shareholders. Ones who understand that sustainable business means treating humans like humans." Some shareholders did leave, but others, impressed by the authenticity of the transformation, invested more heavily. And the company's reputation, battered by scandal, began to recover as word spread about the real changes happening. 3 months after Amelia's return, HeartTech launched a new product, a medical monitoring device priced at cost for low-income families. No profit margin, just the mission of making healthcare accessible. Investors called it financial suicide, But orders flooded in, not just from individuals, but from nonprofits, governments, NGOs, organizations that had never considered Heart Tech because its products were too expensive suddenly became customers. And the publicity was invaluable. News stories about the CEO who'd lost everything and rebuilt with values rather than greed. About the firefighter turned delivery driver who'd showed her what mattered. About a company choosing people over profits. Within 6 months, Heart Tech's revenue was back to pre-scandal levels. But more importantly, its purpose was restored. Employees were engaged. Products were meaningful. The company was finally what Amelia had originally intended. One evening, Amelia and Ethan stood on the roof of Heart Tech headquarters, looking out over the city. "You know what's funny?" Amelia said. "What?" "I spent 10 years building this company, sacrificed everything for it. My relationships, my health, my values. And it took losing it all to realize I'd built it wrong. That success without meaning is just emptiness in a fancy office." "You didn't build it wrong. You built it human, made mistakes, then learned. That's how growth works." "I wish I'd met you 10 years ago, before I became the person I needed to unbecome." "You wouldn't have listened. Sometimes people have to fall before they're ready to fly differently." "Did you have to fall?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah. Sarah's death. Losing the fire department. Years of just existing, not living, just going through motions. You helped me remember that helping people matters, that I can't bring Sarah back, but I can honor what she believed in by continuing to care. That's what the foundation does. It's what Sarah would have wanted. She'd be proud of you. She'd be proud of Sophie. That kid's got more heart than both of us combined." They stood in comfortable silence, two people who'd saved each other in ways they were still discovering. A board member who'd witnessed the return later wrote in his memoir, "When Hart walked into that conference room with the delivery driver behind her, I knew we'd lost. Not because of the evidence she had, but because of what she'd become. Someone who valued one man's character over a dozen executives' credentials." 2 months later, Ethan moved to a new office, still drove the delivery truck in the mornings, but now he carried the Heart Foundation logo. Every morning he still stopped at the old shop, but the stone bench no longer had anyone sitting there. Instead, there was a small sign where a good person left the first coffee. Sophie and Amelia together organized charity programs for children who'd lost parents to accidents. Amelia told Sophie, "Do you know your father saved the whole world without telling anyone?" The girl replied, "I know. I see it every morning when Daddy smiles." At the community awards ceremony, Ethan spoke briefly. "I didn't help a CEO. I just helped someone who'd been forgotten. But because of that, I learned. Sometimes people just need a cup of coffee and someone who doesn't turn away." Symbol of rebirth. The Heart Foundation logo was 2 hands lifting a glowing coffee cup with the words, "Kindness remembers." But the real work of the foundation went beyond symbolism. Over the following months, they placed 300 people in jobs, not charity jobs. Real positions with real companies that the foundation had partnered with, positions with living wages, benefits, respect. They also launched a program Ethan had designed, Second Morning. Every morning, foundation volunteers would go to street corners throughout the city, leaving coffee and breakfast for homeless individuals. Not with judgment, not with strings attached, just with consistency and kindness. The program exploded. Within 3 months, they had 200 volunteers. Within 6 months, it had spread to 5 cities. The simple act of leaving coffee had sparked a movement. One morning, Ethan was making his delivery rounds when he saw something that stopped him cold. At a street corner across town, a young man in a business suit was setting down coffee on a bench where an elderly woman sat. The sign beside the bench read, "Kindness remembers." Ethan watched from his truck, tears in his eyes. This is how change happened, not through grand gestures or huge donations, but through small acts multiplying. One person showing kindness, inspiring another, who inspired another, until suddenly the whole city was warmer. That evening at a foundation board meeting, Amelia shared the numbers. We've had 15 spontaneous kindness remembers locations pop up across the city. People we've never met, inspired by the story, leaving coffee for strangers. It's become something bigger than us. That's the point, Ethan said. We don't own kindness. We just model it. And then other people pick it up and make it their own. That's how movements work. Not top down, but person to person, heart to heart. Sophie, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner drawing, spoke up. Daddy, is this what Mommy wanted? Everyone turned to look at the 7-year-old. What do you mean, sweetheart? Ethan asked. You said Mommy wanted you to help people. Is this what she meant? Ethan knelt beside his daughter. Yeah, baby, this is exactly what she meant. That we make the world better one small choice at a time. One cup of coffee, one kind word. One person seeing another person and choosing to care. That's what Mommy believed, and that's what we're doing. Sophie nodded seriously. Then I think Mommy's happy, even if she's not here. The room was silent, except for quiet crying from several board members. Amelia wiped her eyes. Your daughter is very wise. She is, Ethan agreed. She gets it from her mother. As the meeting concluded, as people filed out, Amelia held Ethan back. Thank you, she said. For what? For reminding me that I'm not just a CEO, I'm a person, and people help people. That's all this is. Just people helping people. The rest is just infrastructure. You're welcome, but you didn't need reminding. You just needed permission to remember. Same thing. Maybe. From this day forward, I choose to see people who are struggling. I choose small acts of consistent kindness. I choose to believe that coffee and compassion can change everything. I will remember to be kind. 1 year later, Heart Foundation opened a new branch called Sophie Center. On the wall hung a photo of Ethan, Amelia, and Sophie with the words, "The man who reminded a CEO how to be human again." At the ceremony, Amelia said, "You forgot me once, but your kindness made me remember forever. Now I'll live so others are remembered for doing good." Ethan replied, "I don't think I saved anyone. I just believe that if everyone gives away a warm cup of coffee, the world becomes less cold." Final scene. Morning at the same street corner from years ago, Ethan and Sophie stood beside Amelia, 3 people holding 3 cups of coffee, watching the sunrise. Amelia said quietly, "Do you remember my question? You asked if I remembered you." "And now?" He smiled. "Now I won't forget again." The camera pulled back, early morning light covering the 3 of them, wind gently shaking the sign. Where kindness begins, everything changes. But the real ending came 3 years later, when Kindness Remembers had spread to 50 cities across 12 countries. Ethan stood at an international conference, uncomfortable in a suit, giving the keynote address. 3 years ago, I left a cup of coffee on a bench for a woman I didn't know. I wasn't trying to start a movement. I was just trying to be the kind of person my wife would be proud of. He paused. What I learned is that we've overcomplicated kindness. It doesn't require grand gestures. It requires seeing another human being and choosing to acknowledge their humanity. A cup of coffee, a moment of recognition that says, "I see you. You matter." After his speech, Amelia joined him on stage. Together, they unveiled First Morning, a global network of community spaces where anyone could come for free coffee, no questions asked. Sophie, now 10, took the microphone. "My daddy saved Miss Amelia twice, once from fire, once with coffee, but Miss Amelia saved Daddy too. They saved each other. That's what kindness does. It goes around until everyone's saved." The audience stood, applauding, many crying. After the ceremony, they returned to the original street corner. The stone bench was still there, now with a plaque, where coffee and kindness began a movement. They sat together drinking coffee, watching the sunrise. "You know what's beautiful?" Amelia said. "That morning 3 years ago I was broken, and you gave me coffee. Not because you knew who I was, just because I was there. That tiny moment changed everything. I'm glad I stopped that morning." "Me too. You gave me back myself, gave me permission to start over." Sophie leaned against her father. "Daddy, can we leave coffee here tomorrow too?" We can leave coffee here every day, sweetheart. Kindness isn't a one-time thing. It's a practice, something we do again and again until it becomes who we are. As they sat there, other people began arriving, volunteers, employees, former homeless individuals helped by the program, all coming to where it started, bringing coffee, sharing stories, connecting. Amelia watched the crowd gathering, the lives that had been changed and felt real purpose. The knowledge that her life mattered because she'd helped others' lives matter. "Thank you," she whispered to Ethan, "for everything, for seeing me, for giving me a second chance. Thank you for doing the hard work of change, for building something beautiful from something broken." They sat as the sun rose higher, as the corner filled with people, as coffee steamed and stories were shared. Where kindness begins, everything changes. And it all started with one cup of coffee. If you believe kindness can make strangers remember each other forever, share this story and subscribe. We tell moments that remind the world that even a simple coffee can change a life.